Whew. Today was tough. Hello, lads and ladettes, kiddos and kidettes, women and womenettes, men and manettes. I do apologize for the delay. I was blocked out of Facebook, literally. So Facebook just decided to block me, which was probably a very wise thing to do. Today's lesson, I asked you to have some art materials ready, and I'm going to talk about a slightly different topic from any of the topics we've spoke about before. To begin with, I would like to ask a question to the class, which will be, from all the ingredients of painting, can you enumerate at least 15? So I'm going to explain this better. You know, music is essentially about pitch, rhythm, harmony, chords, and timbre. You cannot have music if you don't have some sort of sound that always has to be at a certain pitch, because sounds always have a frequency, otherwise you couldn't hear them. So there is a pitch. That sound lasts a certain amount of time, and that is called rhythm. And it might be combined with other sounds, in that case, simultaneously. In that case, you have harmony or disharmony, but it's still a chord. It might be harmonious or disharmonious, it doesn't really matter. And finally, the timbre. So the sound of a flute is different from the sound of a violin, even if they are both playing the same pitch with the same duration. All right? Painting. Which are the ingredients of painting? I would like you to start writing down ingredients. So, the language of painting is composed of... Get started. Meanwhile, I want to show you a few incredible things. My student Charlie, she posted that she received this book online. It's a book I highly recommend. This is spectacular. It was written by David Coles. He's my friend on Facebook, and David, he is also the owner of a fantastic oil paint range that is called Williamsburg. Sorry. Oh God! Now I had a. It's under the tongue. Langridge. So Langridge oil paints, they come from Australia. And they're brilliant, and they're manufactured by David. I recommend all of their colors, apart from the ones that have zinc white. I really don't know why manufacturers still make zinc white when it's very well known that it might cause severe cracking. And until we have more secure data, do not use zinc white in oil paints. But all of the other colors are brilliant. So I highly recommend Langridge oil paints. He wrote this book, Chromatopia. And on the book, you have the most beautiful descriptions of different pigments. Absolutely beautiful. The text is also really good. And as you can see, some of these pigments were made from bones. You've got all sorts of things. You've got bone black, but you also have bone white. If you want to find out more, get the book. There's also wood, which is like indigo from Europe. You've got beautiful chapters about ancient colors. Some of them were quite poisonous. Well, I just opened one. So lead white is poisonous. This one isn't. But Tyrian purple is kind of not used in fine arts because the color fades. You've got the indigo, again, it fades a bit. Malachite. Look at the photos. I mean, the photos are just brilliant. It's the most beautiful book in terms of photography. Azurite, red lead. This one is toxic, and it's freely used in India during some festivals where they'll paint your forehead with red lead, which like I said before, it can, well, if they haven't died, we're not gonna die. But you'll gradually just get mad, you know. So red lead pigment, I don't recommend you paint your forehead with it or throw it in the air. Then you've got verdigris. This one comes from copper with some if you put some vinegar on copper, you get this green kind of rust, which is also a pigment. Anyway, you've got many things. I cannot read this one. Can you read this? Chrysocolla? You tell me. I'm not a native English speaker. Then medieval colors, all sorts of berries and gums and lapis lazuli. You've got pitch black. This one comes from the peeves, and you burn it. Anyway, you've got a lot to read. Lead tin yellow is beautiful. Although it's toxic, it's amazing for impasto. So, you know, when you're painting with thick lumps of paint, lead tin yellow has got a weight to it, so that when you're painting, it's very stringy, and it's just very dense. That's the word that perhaps best describes it. So on medieval paintings, like late Gothic period, when you look at the clothes of Gothic paintings, which are very ornate, usually the golden threads of the fabric would have been painted with a thick, when I say thick, is in thickness, not in terms of thickness of the stroke. Thin lines of thick, lumpy lead tin yellow. So it looks like real gold when you step back. You know, you don't think it's paint. It looks practically like gold threads that were weaved onto the fabric. And then you've got a vermilion, so a very famous paint. This one is very alchemical. There's lots of symbolism related to vermilion, because it represents the union, the love affair between two almost opposite elements. You know, you've got mercury and you've got sulfur, and from their union you have this incredible explosion of a red powder once they are fired together. Saffron, who hasn't eaten it? You can definitely eat it. And blue verditer, I don't know, we could go on and on and on. You have all sorts of inks. See, some come from sepia, from the cuttlefish. It's a really good, beautiful book. I'm gonna leave it now because we have to carry on with our lesson. The photography is just marvelous. So yeah, Chromatopia. It's not expensive either. It's way too cheap actually for the quality of the book. I think I paid, I can't remember, is it £15 or something? It wasn't expensive. I still don't see anyone writing down which are the ingredients of painting, which worries me. Can you guys hear me? There seems to be a lot of confusion about what these lessons are about. These lessons cannot become just me speaking and you guys watching while you eat popcorn, you know? This is not I'm not that entertaining. These lessons must be a dialogue between us. I asked last week if you guys wanted me to carry on with the live streams, or if I should pre-record the lessons with a much higher quality. If there is no feedback, there is no point of me doing these live streams. Does that make sense? Okay, finally, Sarah wrote something. So value, chromatic harmony, texture, transparency, opaque, muted, rhythm, lines, marks, negative space, landscape, portrait, figurative, tone, abstract. Very good. So now we're starting. Now we can start the lesson. There was some sort of feedback, you know, between the class and the teacher. I really don't want this to be a monologue. I'd rather shut down the whole project and drop it on the ground, then carry on like this, okay? Sorry for telling you off, but it's incredibly important that you react, that there's some sort of life behind the camera, you know, otherwise I'm just staring at the lens and I can't see. Is there anyone down there? Can't see you. Now, Sarah, thanks for your reaction. Thanks for showing that you're alive. You're the only one so far. And Natalia, but Natalia, you've been very quiet about the question I've just made. Come on, I want to hear from you. I would like you to start thinking when you conceive an image. I want you to think of visual literacy. I have a brilliant book to recommend to you. I will do it probably next week, because then I will have the book at hand to show it to you. But it's a primer of visual literacy, and the book has got a series of opposites that I want you to think of when you compose an image. Maybe you would like to write down a few of them. And these opposites are not right or wrong. You know, they're all valid. So let's get started with the first one. Balanced or disbalanced? Should your composition be balanced or should it be visually disbalanced? Depends on the subject. If you're painting a war scene, you don't want balance. You probably want disbalance. Other example, some of them Sarah already mentioned. Sarah mentioned value. So do you want your painting or your drawing to be light or dark? They'll have different moods. Just because you chose to paint it light or dark. Same subject, it doesn't matter. Paint the same subject twice. Once with light colors and paint it again, this time with dark colors. You're going to get a radically different feeling. Like in previous lessons, this is similar to tonality in music, you know, major keys or minor keys. So light or dark. Then you've got Maria Elisa, you've got some good ones as well. You mentioned shape. So should your shapes be, let's say, rounded and fluffy, or angular and pointy? Very different emotions you create just by changing this. Do you understand? So there are so many ingredients that you can use to create variety in your artwork. Never be stuck to just one way of doing things. More polar opposites. Please keep writing. I want to hear more from you. I've got many more people attending the lesson live than the reactions I'm getting. Okay, so the remaining ones, you voyeurs, please write down something. You're not here just to watch. We're here to interact. Another example, color. Do you want your painting to be very colorful, even garish, or do you want it to be very muted and grayish? Again, they create a different feeling. And of course, everything I say might be a combination, might be somewhere in between. You know, you can have a muted painting with some garish accents, or vice versa. So it doesn't really matter, but think of this. Next, we've got texture. So do you want your painting to be either visually or in reality? Do you want it to be textured, or do you want it to be smooth? That will create different messages just by changing that. There's much more. What about sharp and blurry? Do you want your painting to be totally blurry? Do you want it to be totally sharp edges, or a combination of the two? Again, you know, you can operate within this. What about transparency and opacity? Are you painting mostly with dense opaque colors, or are you painting with thin transparent glazes, or are you using a combination of the two? Just by altering some of these things, you are radically in a different style. So I'm going to ask you, the class, especially the ones who have not written anything yet, how would you define the style of Expressionism? So Van Gogh, please write it down. And then after write Expressionism, and then slash, and then write your descriptions, okay? Always assume that I don't know what you are talking about, because by the time you reply, I'm already talking about a different style. So please write Expressionism is composed of, and then write down the elements, everything you remember. And then do the same for classical art. For example, Renaissance. Write down which are the elements that make Renaissance. Is it stable or unstable? Is it chromatic, garish, or is it more muted or more earthy? Is it meant to be, realistic or abstract? Is it meant to be, and so on, so on, so on. Write down the ingredients. And finally, do the same for Impressionism. Please write down the ingredients of Impressionism. The cliche, of course, because every painting is a painting. So, is Impressionism light or dark? Is it blurry or sharp? And so on. Okay? Now, a few more ingredients. Matte and glossy. Another ingredient that is very useful is unpredictable or methodical, predictable. So when you look at a painting, you can see if it's full of unpredictability, or if it's the same technique all across the image, the same look. And you've got, let me see if anyone else wrote anything else. Oh yes, brilliant. I'm starting to get replies. Oh, it took a while, didn't it? So Expressionist color is brush strokes, earthy, vibrant, about the artist himself. Very good, John. I'm not sure about the earthy though, because Expressionism tended to use the brightest colors that were available at that time for artists. So when you think of Van Gogh, some of the colors went earthy because they faded. But actually, when Van Gogh originally made those paintings, they were quite garish. They had bright pinks, and all of those bright pinks, those fuchsias, they turned gray, violet gray, and some of the most bright orange yellows, they turned yellow ochre, they turned brown. So when you look at a Van Gogh, you have to imagine that it's 5 times brighter than it looks nowadays, because he used, this is the problem with a lot of paintings from that period, the turn between the 19th century and early 20th century. A lot of those colors were new, were very beautiful, very eye-catching, but highly fugitive. They even used anilines. That shows how bad the pigments were during that time period in history. Okay, so let me see in here. Ian, you've got Expressionism, unstable, garish, subjective. Very good. Marie-Lise, Expressionism, light. Maybe not. If you're talking about Impressionism, then light, yes. But Expressionism, look at the paintings by Kokoschka, or they're all super dark. Even Van Gogh's paintings are not particularly light. They are bright, but they are not pale, they're not pastel. But keep writing. So you've got, Keiko, first time I see you here. Welcome. Renaissance. You've got sharp, dramatic contrast. Keiko, I think you might be talking about Baroque. So when you look at Caravaggio's paintings or Rembrandt, you have the contrast and the dramatic, Caravaggio, but that's essentially Baroque. When you look at Renaissance, think Mona Lisa, or think even the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo, although the Sistine Chapel is becoming Manierism already. So I'd say a famous art piece Renaissance art piece would be any of the drawings or paintings by Leonardo da Vinci, you know, think the Mona Lisa. But thanks for being here. I'm looking forward. Yes, Maria Lisa, you wanted to write Impressionism. I guessed that was a typo. Yes, Impressionism is light. And now question for you. Is Impressionism light and sharp or light and blurry? Is it light and smooth or is it light and textured? You know, give me more information. Give me more information. But you're getting there. It's getting hot. Hot, hot, hot. And Impressionism, John, blurry, paler colors, joyful, lovely, very French. Yes. That's a good definition. I'm going to upset all the French in the world and across the world, and there's plenty in London, so I must watch my back now next time I go to the streets of London. But when I saw the Impressionism, the paintings of Australian Impressionists at the Royal Academy, I was like, wow, that was another level. And with French Impressionism, there are some painters that I highly admire. Like, I love the very last paintings of Monet. I can't stand his initial paintings. I think they're dreadful. God, he was a terrible... See, when people talk about talents, they really don't know what they're talking about. Look at Monet's paintings until something clicked. They're awful. Awful. When I saw the retrospective of Monet's paintings at the National Gallery, absolutely dreadful. It looked like you know the cartoon of Heidi. Do you remember the cartoon of Heidi in the Alps? This was like back in the 80s maybe. Heidi used to be very popular. You remember Heidi? So you have the Swiss Alps and it's all very cartoonish, and that's how Monet was painting. Okay, not good, very kitsch, very bad. And then something clicked and he became brilliant, and the more towards the end of his life, the more brilliant he is. So I love Monet. I love some paintings by Degas. I think he was also great, especially again towards the end of his life. Painting tends to be an art that takes decades to develop. So usually you need to paint for many years until you become really good. Yeah, people don't know what they're talking about when they talk about talent, whatever. They don't know history of art. Same with Rembrandt. He was awful when he started. Awful. It's the kitschest kitsch that was ever concocted by a painter. And then he became great. Indeed, John, eye problems and Monet, that helped, because I think he went garish without knowing. You know, the colors went brighter. But regardless of that, just the fact that he started painting with a looser brush stroke, beautiful textures, beautiful rhythm, you know, that also makes the painting. Now we've got Angela, Impressionism, light, textured, yes, you see the brush strokes, and dreamlike. Then you've got Ian, you said light, blurry, subjective, subdued. Subdued depends, but usually yes, I know what you mean. It is blurry. You also wrote rough, not sharp or optical. I don't know what you mean by optical, because Impressionism was very based on optical perception. You know, they were painting things as they appeared to their eyes at first glance. So the idea of Impressionism is, you know, when you look at a model or a landscape, that first impression that usually takes less than 2 seconds. Yeah, enough. Those first 2 seconds, that's what Impressionist artists were trying to capture when they were painting a scene. Nothing about fiddly details. So yeah, it wasn't realistic in the sense that they were not going after the exact colors, but they were going after the immediate optical illusion in the retina. Does that make sense? It's about immediacy, freshness of look. Now let me see if anyone else wrote anything. No. But I am happy that some of you did. John also wrote about classical. It is composed, beautiful finish. It's perfect, between quotation marks, indeed. About the subject and not the artist. I agree. So classical art is not about boosting your ego. It's the other way around. It's about you falling in love with the subject matter and depicting it. It's about the model. It's about the landscape. It's about the design. It's about not about a story that the artist wants to tell. That usually came much later. Natalia, Impressionism. It's light and blurry. Yes, it's fuzzy. Okay, so I think Francesca, you wrote movement, but what does that mean? Movement applies to what? I don't know what you're talking about. Please always write down the context, okay? Movement. Are you talking about expressionism, maybe? I assume you're talking about expressionism. Renato, you wrote smooth. What is smooth? I assume you're talking about Renaissance. I assume. Now, Ian wrote voyeurs. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed they are. Nobody's writing anything. And that's it for now. And I've got a comment in Portuguese. Irmã Soledade. Esta é a aula em inglês. So this is the lesson in English. The Portuguese one is later. All right. Smooth operator, Renato. Okay, let me get started with. This is still the talking bit, you know, before the drawing starts. Do you all have drawing materials at hand? Today, I want you to create something from imagination. All right? Something from imagination. I need everybody that is attending this lesson to draw or paint. And I really want everybody to post what you have done, whether you like it or not. If you don't like it, I've got a trick for you. Just say it's a study, or a sketch, or call it just a draft, quick draft, you know. If you say something like, this is a study, this is a quick draft, no one will blame you for being an inadequate drawing or painting. If you feel really shy, then please send it to me privately, because I really want to help you with your technique, but I have to see what you guys are doing, okay? And also to make sure that this is not a session for voyeurists. I'm not an exhibitionist. Right. John, you have them? You have what? Let's write down. Guys, if you don't write full sentences, I don't know what you are talking about. Oh, you mean eye problems. I'm trying to refer to what you wrote before. Yes, eye problems are quite frequent, especially after a certain age. But you know, my mom, she did the eye surgery and now she's an eagle. She can see everything across a whole field, you know. She can probably see better than me. I'm going back to this book, the book I highly recommend. Oh, John, I can see now you have drawing materials. Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you for writing a full sentence. And thank you for being very patient with my remarks. But if I don't make these remarks, I really don't know what you guys are talking about. It becomes a surrealist conversation, or maybe Dada, you know, Dadaist. Let's get back to this book. And I want to read a... I want to read again some little bits, from the book. And we are talking in this book, in this chapter that I am at for today. It's talking about how artists are similar to magicians, and you've got lots of tales and stories and things to be narrated. So we're going to start with Japan, with Hokusai, all right? And I'm going to read now. Far Eastern anecdotes employ the same motif, but with a different emphasis. It is related of Hokusai that he dashed off the picture of a cock commissioned years earlier in a few minutes, under the gaze of an impatient client. It sounds like me. Sometimes I take really long time to get started on a painting, but then when I do, yeah, the painting is ready. So, where was I? Yes, he dashed off the picture of a rooster commissioned years earlier in just a few minutes, under the gaze of an impatient client. But then showed the outraged man an entire room full of sketches of all kinds of roosters. So Hokusai would have done his research. He might have spent 2 or 3 years sketching roosters, so that when the time came to produce the masterpiece, he would do it in one single go in front of the enraged client. You know, the client had been waiting for 2 or 3 years. Hokusai had done nothing, so the client thinks, but actually Hokusai had been studying. Hokusai is the artist who made the wave, which is arguably, like the tsunami. It's arguably the most famous Japanese print ever, at least in the West. I'm not sure if it's the most famous Japanese print in Japan, but abroad, yeah. So the conclusion is that the fleeting work of a few minutes was in fact the fruit of years of grinding labor. Again, people that talk about, oh, this child was born with talent, blah, 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 usually they don't know what they're talking about. Usually they do not know what they're talking about. Because art became... let me rephrase everything. Because we live in a culture of immediacy, you know, the famous 10 seconds of attention span that we're always talking about in these classes. And that's why deliberately I speak for so long. I want to make sure that we train our ability to focus, and to focus for extended periods of time in one single subject. Although I have to alternate a bit, you know, to make it entertaining. You know, this is Facebook, this is YouTube, so you have to be a little bit silly, you have to jump from, you know, subject to subject, but nevertheless, has been half an hour and we are still speaking, and I want you focused. Because everything is now made to be immediately appealing, the vast majority of the public is much more impressed by little phenomenons like, oh, that 8-year-old that draws so well, or oh, that person that never had art lessons and now they're painting like Van Gogh. Usually they don't. So the public is more impressed by the show of art than by fine art itself. I would like you to name me which of the top artists were a promising talent since they were young. Not many. There are a few, but not many. Like I said before, some of the world's best painters ever in history, they were actually pretty lame. And they painted for a very long time bad paintings, until things clicked. You know, you have to paint bad to paint good. You have to paint bad to get it out of your system. You have to paint bad, so you get fed up of bad. And when you're fed up with bad, you will evolve into the good. When you get really fed up of good, you will evolve into the excellent. And you have to create neural pathways. You cannot be just listening to me. You have to paint. Do you remember? With what? A hand, which is this. Huh? And if you don't paint with this, then put your brush on your mouth and paint with your mouth. I don't care. Hold it with your feet. I don't care. But paint. It's a bodily fun. You know, you have to move with your muscles. Now, let me see. So Jen, when you wrote Picasso, what do you mean? Please put it in context. Always write full sentences. I assume you are saying that Picasso was a talented child. Not true. Not true. Picasso was like the vast majority of the children of that period that were receiving art lessons since they were little. So Picasso started his formal training when he was 5. And by formal, I mean formal. I mean classical painting technique. And he was learning from a professor of fine arts, which was his own father. So by the time Picasso is about 12, 13 years old, he already draws quite well. But don't forget that 12, 13 years old means that he already had 7 or 8 years of intense artistic training. Does this make sense? Same with Michelangelo. Michelangelo was doing the Davids and the Pietà when he was on his 20s. You know, he was like 23 or something like that when he did one of the two. I can't remember now. But Michelangelo started learning when he was a little child, as it was the custom back then. So that means that by the time you're 23, you already had 15 years of intensive training under a master. All right, 15 years is much more than any fine arts degree nowadays. It's much more than any master's degree nowadays. So when you say that the children were talented, we don't know if they were talented, but they started early, very early. Back in the day, talent was not considered relevant because art was highly based on craftsmanship, and you were kind of born into a lineage of artists anyway. You know, you kind of, either you could learn it or not. It depends on opportunity more than anything else. So you would start by brooming the studio, you know, for maybe a few months you would just clean the studio. Horrible, you know, it's child labor. And then after that you would learn how to grind pigments. You would learn how to, you can't bring coffee because there was no coffee back then. But you would bring maybe some sort of infusion for your master to drink, or wine, and so on. So David Hockney was brilliant, and look at him now. Yeah. Yeah. So John, thanks for writing that. Yeah, I have to agree. But regardless of my opinion, fame isn't necessarily good to artistic talent. If Hockney had not become famous, he would probably have stayed or had become a brilliant painter. Fame can be an issue for a lot of people because fame actually distracts you from your artistic evolution, if that makes any sense. It becomes more about attending a gathering or an opening night, meeting this politician, meeting that millionaire, doing interviews for radio or television or essays for a book, and it becomes less and less about the painting. So fame is highly distracting. Now I've got a few questions in here which, let me see. We are ready. Yes, Keiko. Yes, we are. We are ready. Renato, script, please. Oh no, not yet. Renato keeps bullying me about getting ready with all the materials to finish the bark course. Listen, guys, I've been promising you a bark course for the last 2 or 3 months. But I'm doing like Hokusai, you know? Once the bark course is finished, it's going to be incredibly done right in front of your enraged eyes, you know? I know the public is getting very disappointed with me. I've been promising a course for the last 2-3 months. The baby is starting to be born. I already see 2 feet. Oops, no, it's the head first, right? I think the bark course will be born soon. I see 2 feet already. It's in reverse. No. So Jen fell in. Yeah, we spoke about Picasso. Amisha, sorry I changed the subject as I know you're not talking about them, but it intrigued me how yes, how stupid people can be made to pay money for such items. Yeah, me too. Again, Amisha, has nothing to do with art, okay? So don't blame artists. Don't even blame gallerists, because they you know, they have to stay open. They have rents to pay, they have employees to pay, electricity bills, and you name it. I don't blame these people. I blame indeed the clients. You must be extremely stupid to buy a lot of that rubbish. And again, some of them do it as investment. Amisha, there's also a lot of money laundering. A lot of money laundering. So some of those clients, unfortunately, they're not stupid. They know very well what they are doing, and what they are doing is illegal. But because the art market is totally unregulated, apart from 2 or 3 little things, you know, just to pretend, because the art market is unregulated, yeah, people are buying paintings for millions, but many times it's just exchange of money between corrupt criminals. Does that make sense? Now, Maria Elisa, could you please refer to pre-Raphaelites using 2-3 of the tags above? Yes. So pre-Raphaelites, when you look at most of the pre-Raphaelite paintings, usually there is balance. So for example, you will never see a pre-Raphaelite painting that it's just an empty canvas with just one hand coming from a corner. Just that. Never. This wouldn't be pre-Raphaelite, you know. You need a balanced, perhaps a more central type of composition, not just a little body part coming into the canvas. Generally speaking, with some exceptions, they are prone to detail. Pre-Raphaelites tend to paint with very little brushes, and sometimes with hatching. You see a lot of hatching in some of the pre-Raphaelite paintings. You see some applications of gold in some of the backdrops. It's kind of medieval. It's not medieval, but they took a lot from the Middle Ages. So you've got, you know, some gold in some of the lettering, or even in the backgrounds of the paintings. You've got an element of color. The pre-Raphaelites were they're not all equally good. Some of the pre-Raphaelites are dreadful, absolutely dreadful. Again, I don't know how England rates them so highly. Come on, English, why do you rate some of these pre-Raphaelite paintings so highly? They're kitsch. Kitsch. But some of the pre-Raphaelite painters were brilliant. Like, to me, the quintessential English painting was Ophelia by Millet. And that's pre-Raphaelite. It's beautiful, absolutely stunning. To me, that's the quintessential English painting from any period in history. If I had to choose one painting made in this island, that I think it's totally iconic and it transcends time. It's Ophelia, and that's a pre-Raphaelite painting. You also, I'm not including now the Middle Ages, because you also had these wonderful Irish scrolls like the Book of Kells or Lindisfarne, you know, medieval scrolls. They're stunning, Celtic. But I'm talking now about painting, you know, as we know it on a canvas. So the pre-Raphaelites, like I said, they like balance, they like detail. Some of them loved color, especially the better ones. Otherwise it's just murky and dirty and muddy and dead. That appeals to the English taste. Some things I'll never understand. I have a British passport. I've been in this country for 17 years. I still don't get this love for mud. You know, I don't get it. But the subject matter tended to be elevated. So pre-Raphaelite paintings tell a story, and the story usually has some sort of moral or ethical conclusion. I'd be interested in discussing this with you if you want, because we have to move on with the lesson. But I'm going to give you one last element. This is partially a myth, but it's partially true. So you can do your research then and find out how much of it was a myth and how much of it was a fact. But some pre-Raphaelites are renowned for having painted with transparent colors on top of sticky, tacky white paint. What they would do, and now you're going to research and you're going to find out if this is a myth or if this is a fact. I won't tell you. What they would do, according to some writings, is they would they would do the underdrawing, you know, so they would draw the shapes, and then they would cover the section that they were going to paint that day. They would cover it with a thin layer of white paint that was mixed with copal varnish. You cannot get copal varnish anymore, or if you do, it's going to be really low quality. The high quality copal varnish in the 19th century, it's totally gone. And the reason is that high quality copal resin disappeared. We don't have it anymore. Okay, you cannot find good copal fossil resin like you could back in the 19th century. So don't try this technique at home with copal varnish, because it's not going to work. It's not the same varnish that we use nowadays. But back where I was, they would cover that section of the canvas with sticky white. Sorry, not sticky white. They would cover it with white. But because the copal varnish would start to dry really fast, within a few hours the paint would get sticky. And while the paint was sticky, then yes, they would start applying the colors on top with very soft brushes, very, very soft brushes, and by using transparent colors. So we're talking glazing. They would glaze on top of the sticky white. And the danger was, there's a real danger. It's a difficult technique to do, because if by accident you press too much with your brush that has the glaze color, accidentally you're going to disturb and mix it into the white, and that spoils the whole effect. You lose the transparency, you know. You must preserve the transparency. So read more about it, and then we will speak again. One last thing is that they did use zinc white, and some of the paintings did not crack. The pre-Raphaelites used zinc white. So you're telling me, Nelson, you're always forbidding zinc white. What's the matter with zinc white? The pre-Raphaelite paintings did not crack, and they used zinc white, and they're on canvas. Now, you must learn 2 or 3 things about paints. First of all, the zinc that they had in the 19th century, we don't know if it's the same type of zinc that is used nowadays to make zinc white. Let me explain. There are 3 types of zinc white crystals. For sure, one of them cracks. Arguably 2 of them, and perhaps 3. But for sure 1 of them cracks. Most probably 2 of those types of crystals crack. Maybe a 3rd one does not crack, but maybe it does. And until we know better, we cannot be using modern day zinc white, because we don't even know what type of crystal will crack. And there are 3 types, I repeat. Manufacturers don't know which ones will crack or not. We don't have enough studies. Secondly, did you know that pre-Raphaelite painters, especially Millet, when he did Ophelia and Amisha, I agree, Ophelia, that painting wows people, you know. When you saw it at the Tate and you felt wowed, I'm the same. The painting grows on you. So the more months and more years that you think about that painting, the better it becomes. And that's the hallmark of a masterpiece. It grows on you with time instead of you forgetting about it. But you know that Millet used a double canvas. So he would stretch a canvas first and prime it and all of that, leave it to dry, and then he would stretch a second hemp canvas on top. And because it was a double canvas, that would make it more rigid and it would prevent the paint from cracking. So you must know more things about technique to assume that zinc white will not crack if you use it nowadays. And last but not least, they mixed it with copal varnish. You are not mixing your zinc white paint with copal varnish. You don't even have copal varnish anymore. You have weak substitutes nowadays. So no, don't use zinc white. The materials have shifted, have changed through, you know, in time. Now next, just in your opinion, Nelson, who made greater paintings? Oh my god, I'm in trouble now. So Ian, who made greater paintings? William Waterhouse or Jacques-Louis David? They have different, I'd say these 2 artists had different strengths. David was important in terms of the political message and the revolution and so on. To my personal taste, so I can't say one is better than the other, but to my personal taste, I prefer Waterhouse. I do prefer Waterhouse. Guys, type William Waterhouse censored painting in Liverpool. It's the most beautiful painting ever. And I think it was the Liverpool Art Gallery, if I'm not mistaken, was going to censor the painting. Supposedly that was an experiment made by curators. I don't believe it. I think they're picking up on the American trend of censoring politically incorrect images. The hell with censor, you know, I'm really fed up. The whole point of the arts is that you should have free speech in the arts, within the arts, even if it's highly shocking. I believe in absolute free speech when it comes to the arts. Not when it comes to social media, not when it comes to publishing fake news. No, that shouldn't be free speech. But when it comes to the arts, the whole point of the arts is that you should allow whatever comes to your unconscious to emerge. You should not be censoring things just because the public is not ready, or just because you are wrong. Doesn't matter. It's an artistic statement. Now, Waterhouse was censored because, according to the curator, the painting was objectifying women. People need to read more. People need to study more. The ancient Greek legends that has been depicted on the painting, it's the opposite. It's the nymphs that objectified that man. It's the nymphs that kidnapped the man to make wild love to him. It's the opposite of objectifying women, you know? But on the 21st century, now we are neo-Puritan. So we assume things because we're ignorant. We're ignorant of the past. We're ignorant of what that painting meant. Please type Waterhouse, censored painting, Liverpool. It's the most beautiful thing. I think he was great. So, oh my goodness me. And we have no time to paint. It's already 8 p.m. I have to log out. I'm just going to quickly answer another 2 or 3 comments. And I've got a homework for you. I would like you to paint something fully from imagination. And you are going to decide first if your composition, if you want it to be balanced or unbalanced, if you want it to be realistic or abstract, or in between, if you want it to be classical or modern or naive or you name it, if you want it to be light, medium or dark, if you want it garish or muted or black and white even, if you want high contrast or low contrast. All right, if you want things to be ordered, or if you want suddenly somewhere in the middle to create a stain or a patch that is not expected, that all depends on the subject. Do you want straight lines, horizontal lines for the shading, you know, vertical lines, diagonals, or free-flowing? Make those choices. Horizontal lines will give stability. Vertical lines will create a feeling of heightened importance. Diagonals will create rhythm, like you know, when rain is falling down but the wind is blowing, so the rain comes diagonally. That creates an idea of motion. And of course, free-flowing can create many different things. Are you going to shade mostly with dots, with line, or with stains? Do you want your painting to be sharp or blurry, angular or rounded, you know, minimalist or maximalist, you know, simple or full of detail? Do you want it to be complex or void? Make a decision, please. Draw whatever comes to your head. No censorship, and please, please, please post the results. There will be no judgment on the outcomes of these paintings. This is like live streaming, but in art, okay? Do whatever comes to your mind. And finish before you try to make it perfect, unless you chose perfection as one of the ingredients. If you did not think of perfection, finish, keep it simple, keep it within 30 minutes, 1 hour maybe, exercise, you know, 1 hour maximum, and then post it. Now let me see what else wrote. Indeed, Amisha, when art is censored, it's very sad, and it's very telling of our society. Yeah, I'm glad, Ian, that I passed your test. You also prefer Waterhouse. Okay, I passed your test. That's good. Yeah, David was a giant for neoclassic style, but he also stilted the tradition of painting in France. You know, it became so regimented and so stiff that when we think of academic art, we think of boredom. And that's because the art academies of France were teaching this very boring tradition that was partially, had a lot to do with David, I must say. Sorry David, I hope you're not cursing me from the hereafter, you know, from the next life. When we meet one day, I hope we can still be friends, David. But I think you created a style that a whole generation had to rebel against. So yeah, John, you agree with the Waterhouse choice? And finally, Angela, just looked it up. They're beautiful and not vulgar from what I saw. I agree, Angela. If you guys could type on the dialog box the link to the Waterhouse painting, I would really appreciate that, because then everybody else can see it. Okay, so Angela, you found the image. If you can find an image in high resolution on Google or something and paste the link onto the dialog box, I would really appreciate. Now, to complete the lesson, I'm going to leave you, but I'm just going to read one or two more things. That speed is the result of practice and of special competence on the part of the master, has also been maintained by Western artists, just like Hokusai, in exactly the same spirit as this story, the story of the rooster that you heard before. Whistler upheld this viewpoint in court in order to prevent one of his works from being evaluated by the amount of time he spent on it. Whistler's paintings were dashed out very, very quickly, but that's because he had decades of years of practice. When Whistler started painting, he wasn't a fast painter, but after a few decades he was really fast, and that's some of his best paintings. You know, the Nocturnes by Whistler are beautiful. They're like music in paint. You know, the Nocturnes, they're blurry. The color harmony is just stunning. It's just like dusk. There's hardly anything in those paintings, and yet they say so much. It's poetry. It's visual poetry. Now, I'm going to jump to a story that I've already taught my students in London when they attend my lessons, which is the story of Giotto, where he drew a perfect circle. Look, the Pope wanted to find out who was the best painter in Italy. So he sent art experts all across Italy to find the greatest living master. And when they went to the studio of Giotto, they asked Giotto to give them his best painting so that they could show that painting to the Pope. You know, the Pope would be then doing a beauty contest, paintings from all across Italy, which is the most beautiful painting. So when Giotto heard that request, he must have puzzled the Pope's art experts, because when he heard that request, he just drew a circle and he said, "Give this to the Pope." Much later on, when the Pope was looking at the stunning artworks from all across Italy and he saw the circle, the Pope asked, "Who dared to send this to me?" And the art experts replied, "It's Giotto from the city of Padua." The Pope inquired, "How did he draw the circle? Did he use a compass?" And the art experts replied, "No, he drew it freehand in front of us when we asked for his best painting." The Pope concluded, he is the best painter of Italy. Bring him on." Of course, this story is a myth, and when you look at Giotto's paintings, they're all crooked. He wasn't actually very good drawing circles. So this is again an urban myth. People make up stories. But because of that, you have the proverbial pronouncement in Italy, which is "Tu sei più tondo che l'o di Giotto." You are sharper than Giotto. That's the meaning. And I think I'm going to complete one last tale, one last story about artists to entertain you. You know, artists, these mysterious creatures. I'll just tell you one last story. And this was written by Leonardo Da Vinci. You know, he had his diaries, and eventually the diaries were disassembled and reassembled again by his students, and they became books. This was after Leonardo's death. So Leonardo wrote on his diaries that a priest sprinkled holy water on an unfinished picture and attempted to calm the enraged artist by saying that he was only performing a good deed and that every good deed would be repaid 100-fold from above. The artist took it upon himself to make the priest's words come true. Leaning out of a window, he threw a bucket of water over the departing priest. Artists were famous for having a temper. And because artistic talent was associated with some sort of divine inspiration, artists would be allowed to perform this kind of strange eccentricities. But yeah, this is quite fun. There's lots and lots and lots of paintings that are described in this book with lots of funny stories about artists. I'll just read you one more. When a man who had commissioned a painting from Bartolo Giorgi was disappointed because there were too few birds in the landscape, Bartolo Giorgi retorted that the birds had flown away because the servants had left the windows open. So, when two cardinals reproached Raphael for painting Saint Peter and Saint Paul with very red faces in one of his pictures, the artist replied, "That should not surprise you. I've done it deliberately. After all, one must assume that Saint Peter and Saint Paul are as red-faced in heaven as you see them here, because of the shame that their church is governed by people like you." It's brilliant. And when Michelangelo... Okay, this is not Michelangelo. In the same spirit, Michelangelo countered the objection that in his Pietà, the Virgin seemed to be the same age as her son by asking, "Isn't it true that chaste women remain young for much longer?" So anyway, I highly recommend this book, and I'll have to log out. Amisha, which story did you love? Complete sentences, please. Otherwise, I don't know. Yeah, thanks, Angela, for posting the image of Hylas and the nymphs. I'm going to log out now. As usual, log into my YouTube channel. Just type on YouTube Nelson Ferreira art classes and you will find me. Subscribe so that you don't miss any of the lessons. And I'm going to log out now. Please post not just this video on your wall, but also the results of your painting from imagination. Okay? No critique this time. I promise not to be rude, not to say the things I like to say. I promise I will be really nice to everybody. Just today, okay? Don't get used to it. Don't get used to it. You take care. Ciao, ciao. Bye.